Hello, everyone. This is Jeff and Tony Brabeck with Our Little Sparrows. If you'd like to find out more about us and our lost story in our organization, you can use the link in the description down below. This month, November, is Sibling Loss Awareness Month. And for those of you who have had a baby loss and you've either had children already before that baby loss or you've had subsequent pregnancies and had your rainbow babies, you know that your children grieve that loss as well. Well, today, Tony and I are going to share with you challenges that we personally have embraced with our own 4-year-old, James, in his grief of losing his sister, Olivia. And today, we're also going to give you tips and some recommendations or suggestions on how to help walk alongside the grief journey that your child is on. So stick around.
All right, so to begin, I want to share with you an article that we found on Still Standing Magazine. The website is stillstandingmag.com. And for those who may not know, Still Standing Magazine is an online magazine that supports families who have experienced child loss from conception to adulthood and also infertility.
Right.
And a lot of the articles, actually, I think all of the articles, are written by parents themselves who have experienced loss. So their personal stories about their journey. And we want to highlight one that we found. This is written by Abigail Waldron. Hope I'm saying that right. And she is also the author of a book called Far as the Curse is Found, Searching for God in Infertility, Miscarriage, and Stillbirth. And she is also the mother of 4, 2 on earth and 2 that are gone too soon. So she wrote a article or a blog, I guess you could say, for Still Standing, and it's on sibling loss, and it's called She Grieves Too. And in the article, which I will share with you in just a minute, she shares about how her and her husband chose to share about the baby they lost. I think the daughter was maybe just a really young, like a small baby. But I wanted to highlight 3 key points that I got from the article. And the first one is that children understand more than we give them credit for in terms of grief and death. Second, children experience big feelings. Their emotions are big and they're real. And they will express it in many different ways. So you will see that probably in your own children and other kids as well. The third point is that children's grief experience is real, and that's something as parents we should not overlook or shy away from addressing. So I want to share with you the article. It's really quick, so I just want to share with you real quick. Abigail writes, when we told her she had a sister who died, I did not expect her to grieve. The loss had occurred 2 years previously when she'd been just a baby herself. And my husband and I hadn't said anything to her at the time, knowing there was no way she could understand the death of a sibling. But at 3, we decided she was ready to hear the news. In recent months, we'd welcomed a new baby sister born alive and healthy, but we wanted her to know about her other sister too. For some reason, I expected that she would listen to our words, nod, and then run off to play, unaffected. Since she had a living baby sister and since she was still so young, I didn't think she would understand what she'd lost. But I was wrong. We told her, and immediately she was overcome by a deep and genuine sadness. She cried. She wanted to know why the baby had died. She wanted there to be a way to make her heart start beating again. She even demanded that we all die so that we could go to heaven and meet her. We cried with her and held her close, grieving together the baby that none of us would ever meet. Later that afternoon, we played outside, and she seemed herself again, happy and free. But in the days and weeks that followed, she often talked about the baby who died, the baby we'd named Eveline. She still wanted to meet her somehow, still mourned the loss of that opportunity, and when people asked how many children were in our family, she never hesitated. 3, she would say. There are 3 kids in our family. She was young, but she understood what had happened. She understood what she'd lost. Her grief was, and is, both real and deep.
That's amazing. I think that really reminds me of just our experience with James and Just the whole fact that they thought, I mean, I thought similar, like they would just say, okay, and not really fully understand and move on and go play. And I thought Jay would do the same thing. And to a certain degree they do, but then they come back. I know he came back, so our experience was a little different. And I think all of our experiences are going to be different in this case. But it's really good to hear a parent's experience like this, and it helps put it, Sibling Loss Awareness Month into perspective, that those children are grieving. And it's very impactful. They may not fully understand it like an adult would, but they definitely have a childlike understanding. And boy, is that, Abigail really, she really expressed it out there. So it's beautiful. Well, if you guys are getting value out of this episode, we just really would invite you to subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to ring the bell so you can get alerts. We do post weekly. Every week we have an episode for you guys. And if you have comments or questions, there is the comment section down below. We just encourage you to go ahead and make a comment or post a question. Tony and I do answer all those. So we definitely enjoy interacting with you guys, our Sparrow family. So moving into talking more specifically about Sibling Loss Awareness Month, it's really important to embrace the challenge, right, that our children are facing. And I think as parents ourselves, we're facing a challenge, trying to work with our children so that they can journey through this grief process in a healthy way, right? So a lot of times, we have these awareness months, but we don't fully comprehend or understand why. So it's like, we just got done with October, Pregnancy and Infant Loss Month. And it's like, well, it's great that we're spending a month on this, but my grief lasts year round. So I've seen a lot of posts lately that says, October may have passed, but every day for me and my family is Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness. And, the same goes for our children. Our rainbow babies and our babies that we had before we even experienced a pregnancy or infant loss. So this is a month to acknowledge the impact of that loss on our children. I think that's pretty evident. It's important that we recognize the need for support. Just as we as adults need support, our children need support as well. And then those resources. I know a lot of parents are probably out there and just wondering, who can I talk to? What can I do to help my children through this process? And obviously, Tony and I are sharing part of our personal experience, but we also have our sources. Specifically, we are sourcing today from 0to3.org, and we'll put the link to that in the description below. But some of the challenges that are they're evident within our family as a whole and working with our children and their grief is that as parents, we want to protect our children. I think that's our defense mechanism. That's our primary thought process. Is like, what can I do to help my child? And sometimes we go in the wrong direction. So today is really about what can we do that's positive and encouraging to our children. So that's the challenge number one. It's like, we may feel like we want to shield them. We want to rush to tell them it's okay. We want to rush to take away the pain. And that's important. It has its place. But we also need to give our children space, just as we're asking others as adults, as the parents, as the mom, as the dad, we're asking others to give us space to process that grief. We also need to allow our children space to do that as well. But it's a tricky balance because we have to parent, right? So I'm getting a beep in my head. Sorry. I didn't know the timers do beeps, but anyhow, it's like, but so that's a challenge right there. And something that we need to understand too is that children grieve differently than adults. And I kind of went into that a little bit. Children grieve differently than even other children, like personalities. All that stuff is going to play into it. Know that children are going to process their grief and concept of death itself and what that means differently. Obviously, they're going to be asking questions. They're going to take a lot of cues from what they hear you say, they watch you do. But they're also going to have their own, they're going to take all that information and they're going to come up with their own definition a lot of the times. And we just need to be there to help them and guide them, right? So it's important to know that different stages of life for your child, they're going to have different levels of understanding too. So younger children, a toddler, preschool, may not understand the finality of death. I wouldn't shy away from explaining to them on their level. And at some point, they're going to get, as they get older, they're going to get a better understanding and get it
Right.
as an adult understands death. And that age is going to be different for everyone.
Hmm.
There are behavioral changes, and that comes out in regression, insecurity, just like adults, right? Anger, frustration, um, anxiety, like
Hmm.
a lot of those things are gonna also be there in your children, but it takes us as parents to recognize it. And if your kids are in school, with COVID, it's different. But typically, a teacher is gonna say, "Hey, this is what I'm seeing. I don't know what's happening at home."
Hmm.
Parent teacher type stuff. So listen to that. I wouldn't deny it or say no, it's not. My child's fine. It's important to face this head on, and obviously deal with it in a manner at which you want to for your family. But emotional detachment, emotional attachment, those are very prevalent when a kid is grieving, a child is grieving, and then repetition
Hmm.
in young children. They just get stuck right in that
Hmm.
repetitive conversation or that repetitive question because they just don't understand why did this
Hmm.
happen.
Right. I just want to add, like with little kids, toddlers, preschool, repetition is the way they learn. So, they're always asking that same question,
Right.
regardless of what the topic is. They're going to ask the same question over
And it
and over
doesn't mean they don't
again.
get it. It means
Right.
they want to
That's
know more.
that. Well, yeah, and that's just how they learn, like
Mm.
repetition. So, you may have to answer the same question over and over again, which can be
Which
hard
we
for
have.
us
Yeah.
as a parent to kind of have to explain that over and over again. But for young
Mhm.
children, that is how they learn. So
Right.
that's a
And
challenge
I
for
know for
me.
myself, I've gotten frustrated because Jay will keep asking about heaven and why can't I go, and
Hmm.
and there's other things, and it's like I've already, we've said this 5 6 times, and they get it, but they're struggling. They're
Yeah.
struggling just as adults struggle, but on a
Level.
child's level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, great. Well, we want to take just a moment to share with you a beautiful book that was written by author Amy Lands. She's also a dear friend of ours
Yeah.
and has written multiple books to help the pregnancy
Yeah.
and infant loss community. But she's written a children's book,
Yep.
and I'm just going to read a little bit from the or about the book.
Hmm.
So it's called Perfectly Imperfect Family.
Hmm.
And Perfectly Imperfect Family is a beautiful demonstration of how a brother loves, honors, and includes his sister who died before he was born in the family's special days every day. Special days and every day. And it's a must have book. We believe this is a must have book for all families who have experienced the loss of a baby and want to normalize their perfectly imperfect family.
Hmm.
So we are going to put the link in the description below. We encourage you to check it
Hmm.
out. We have it, and it was such a easy read and something lighthearted read
Hmm.
to share with our son James, and so it helps him understand
Hmm.
a little bit more about the death of his sister and also how we can remember her and include her
Hmm.
in our daily lives and special days. So definitely encourage you to check that out. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's really good.
It's a great book.
Yeah, everyone should have it. Okay. So, we want to go over with you some helpful tips for your children when navigating the death of their baby sibling.
Hmm.
So, again, we are sourcing from 0 to 3.org. And so, we're just going to share some of what
Hmm.
we have taken and also some from our
Personal.
own personal
Yeah,
experience.
for
So,
sure.
we definitely encourage you, parents, to not be afraid to include your children in conversations about the death of their
Hmm.
sibling. Be honest yet simple, depending on their age, using age appropriate um, wisdom. Simple truths, especially for younger children, are more beneficial.
Right.
So, it's okay to say that she died.
Hmm.
Not to be afraid to use those words.
Yeah.
Avoid, or did you want to say something?
Well, I was just going to say, even in the pregnancy and infant loss circles that, on Instagram, Facebook,
Mhm.
I've seen some recent posts, and I'm sure if you're heavy into social media, you've seen them too. It's like, no, I didn't lose my
Mhm.
keys. I didn't lose my baby. My baby's died.
Mm-hmm.
So my baby died.
Yeah.
Some people are really, trying to hit home in the community of pregnancy and infant loss that we need to stop beating around the bush and get to the point, is really what they're saying. And they're like, look, it's okay to say died. It's okay to say death. But to say lost is almost giving people outside of our community that have not had baby death. We're almost giving them an excuse to continue the taboo subject of talking about our babies that have died. So I know I've seen that in social media a lot lately. So you guys might relate to that.
Yeah, and actually that kind of talks or leads into the next point, which is avoid euphemisms. I don't know if I said that right. So
Yep.
using phrases that say she passed away in her sleep, or Papa went to heaven. Like you said, we lost our child. So those are not accurate statements, although we,
Right.
as adults, we understand what they mean. But for children, that can cause confusion. They can develop a fear of going to sleep because if grandma
children take
passed away
things
in her
literal,
sleep,
right?
yeah,
It's
then,
literal.
then it's, they develop a fear of, or can develop a fear of going to sleep, or even of heaven. Even our son James was like, I don't want to go to heaven, because that meant that he wouldn't be able to come back and be with us.
Right. And before he even got to that step,
Yeah.
the first step was, well, if Olivia, our firstborn, if Olivia's in heaven, I want to go there.
Yeah.
He didn't
that too.
understand the finality of that, right?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, sugarcoating it is a common phrase that I grew up hearing. But yeah, we need to be accurate.
Yes,
for sure.
accurate with age-appropriate, simple truths. So sometimes it's hard to know what those are because we've heard it ourselves how to deal and what to say, but now we've kind of have to train
Right.
our mind and kind of refresh our vocabulary when it comes to that. So also another important tip is to allow them to ask questions and express their feelings.
Right.
And the important part about that is to allow them to do that without them feeling questioned or being criticized by you as the parent or the adult. So make sure we hold that space for them that allows them to feel safe to ask anything that they need to.
Right.
Another good tip is to let them lead you. It's amazing to see how much, as we have already shared, that children actually understand about grief, about death. And so allow them to tell you, tell you what they think, and show you how they want to process this,
Right.
so
Go at their speed.
take cues from them. And
that actually ironically makes it easier on you.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, when we feel like we're giving an answer, and as we get to the tail end of that answer, we're starting to struggle for words, our own words on what to say. Usually that's a good indication. We could have stopped a second or two ago,
Right.
and they're not even ready for that part of the conversation. So just answer direct. If they're asking about, why can't I go to heaven, then just say, when we die, we go to heaven and we can't come back. So simple.
Simple. Okay.
We're not saying it's easy, by the way.
No, it's not.
But we're saying we need to change our frame of mind, from what society says. We need to move away from protectionism and move towards being truthful and honest, and telling your child what they can handle at that moment.
And equipping them, and essentially it's equipping them
for their adulthood.
And later on when they get to school,
on how to deal with stuff,
deal with disappointments.
Yeah, totally. There you go.
So, and then the next one is to invite them to participate in rituals or memorial customs, or ceremonies. When October in Pregnancy and Infant Loss Month, we had a lot of memorial type events going on that were child friendly. So events that have a craft for the kids, or a butterfly release, something that is that they can participate in, that they can come and watch, and they know that this is in honor of their sibling. Helps them to understand that there are others that are also in this with them, so that there are other kids that have experienced the loss as well.
Yeah. I know before COVID, our Sharing Parents group of Sacramento, we have an October memorial where well over 200 people show up at the Memorial Garden, the Memorial Rose Garden downtown.
Sacramento.
So yeah, we've taken Jay to many of those, and now that he's 4, obviously, he's retaining like what, like, oh, I remember now.
Yeah.
That we did this. We went to this event. So yeah, it's important to involve them for sure. So the other source that we are pulling from is the grief recovery method, and specifically, there is a book by the grief recovery method called "When Children Grieve," and this is by John James and also his partner,
Russell Friedman.
Yeah, Russell Friedman. Yeah, so we encourage you to look that book up. It's on Amazon, or you can go to griefrecoverymethod.com.
Yes.
So specifically, it's important to know that children watch how we as adults are responding to loss.
Yes.
So they're looking for our lead, and sometimes they get over their skis and we have to pull them back, right? So it's kind of a tug and pull situation, and day to day it's going to be different, month to month, year to year. It is important that we are setting the example as the adults. So I mean, as we've said over the last 6 months, communication is important, keeping those lines of communication open, allowing each other to grieve in their own way. If a child sees that mom or dad are trying to tell each other that you shouldn't be crying right now, or you shouldn't be really upset about losing him or her, it's been X years, those are negative things, negative things that we're sending our children, signals to shut it down and not allow that emotion to surface and to express it. It's important that they feel freedom, right? So we shouldn't put any constraints on anyone, and our kids are watching.
Yes.
It's important, certain messages that we're sending, to kids that can be detrimental, is to not feel bad, to replace the loss. I know a common example is when the dog dies, it's like, well, we'll just go buy another one.
Yeah.
And we're not allowing that time for the family to breathe and to take it in. We do the same thing with our human loss. We've heard so many times in the pregnancy and infant loss community, it's like, oh, so you're young, you can still have another, right? You guys know exactly what we're talking about. Same thing with our children. We got to be careful that we're not telling them, oh, here's a cookie, here's some candy, you'll feel better.
Right.
There's so many different levels of that, really. Another thing that I thought was really important, Tony, you want to speak on this, is the grieve alone.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty key.
Yeah, and I think just to kind of explain that a little bit more is like oftentimes we are being taught as well when we were young that when something bad happens or we're really sad, we're supposed to go to our room and cry. Or an example that is given in the When Children Grieve book is one of the authors, I believe it's Russell,
It's his example.
His example of how when a family member died in his family, and I think it was,
I believe it was his dad, and his mom was grieving,
and so
openly
he was told to leave her alone.
Yep.
Not to bother her. She's not having a good day right now, and just needed some time to grieve. So what did that teach him is that we're supposed to grieve alone. And there are times when being alone is needed, but all in all, to grieve in a healthy way, to move in a healthy direction, is that we need to grieve together. We need support. We need people to surround us, and therefore we actually can support each other. Right.
And I think just in having to do with anything in moderation, right? These things in of themselves are not terrible.
Right.
But if you're telling your child you shouldn't feel bad, period.
Right. Yeah.
That's different, right? Same thing with replacing the loss. It's like, well, am I to forget about my baby that just died because I can get pregnant again, or I can adopt or foster, or what, the list is on and on, right? The same thing with grieve alone. There is a proper time to say, okay, not at this exact moment, or this isn't the best time, or hey, let's go over here. I mean, there's different variations of this. We're mainly talking about the ones that shut it down, or not the ones, but we're mainly talking about how these can be used in such a negative way that it shuts it down, period.
Yeah.
Right.
That it doesn't allow opportunity for the child just to even feel like they can feel or express the grief surrounding the loss of their sibling. Like it's just we
Yeah.
need to be able to give them a better space and so that they can be equipped to handle it when they get older
Yeah.
and feel more confident or secure, I should say, secure in
Right.
how to deal
And
with
if
it.
we ever have to leave a moment, we should always come back to it. And that goes directly with Tony saying that they have to be able to complete their grief thought, their grief feelings, and so on and so forth. So, keeping busy is another one. It's important that we don't just shoot right past it. I know for guys, it's very common to not know what to do with our feelings, not know what to do with the thoughts that are conflicting with our feelings. Also, when we don't know what to do to help support, or we think we are supporting by moving on, by keeping busy. She's not moving on. Realistically, you're not moving on. That grief is still there. At some point, you're going to have to face it.
Yeah.
So it's important to, if you are going to do something to distract yourself from the grief, that it's momentary and it's not used as a permanency in order to just band-aid right over like it never happened, right? We have to come back to it at some point and we have to talk about it. And so, but sometimes we do need that break. Sometimes we just need to, go mow the lawn. We just need to get out of town,
Right.
Get your mind off of it, but don't dismiss it to where you never address the loss, you never address the grief. Same thing for our kids. Kids will be kids. You'll think that they're over it, and then all of a sudden, one day or one night, while you're putting them down to bed, they just blurt something out. Whether they're afraid, scared, mad, or confused, like it just randomly comes, and that's when it's like, okay, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
And Tony's been really good with that with Jay. I love some of the stuff you told me that you guys have talked about. It actually makes me feel like I want to talk to Jay. I want him to talk to me and ask me those questions too.
Right.
Time heals all wounds. That's one of the terrible things. We're under this assumption that if we just give it time, that we will not feel the pain anymore. And Tony and I can tell you from our own personal experience, 7 years after losing Olivia, 6 years after our first miscarriage, 2018, so 2 years this last March, since we had our second miscarriage, like those memories pop up. The grief comes at you at different angles, at different moments in your day, in your year, in your month, in your week, and it just hits you, and you are overwhelmed with emotion or thought, and you process in that moment what you're thinking and what you're feeling, and that's just the nature of grief.
Right.
I think another thing is it's important to be cautious. We're not creating a sense of burden for our children to bear. So this is kind of the opposite end of what we've been saying. We've been saying involve, talk with your kids. But I said this earlier, we still have to parent. We still have to understand that they're only able to probably, it depends on how many kids you have. Jay technically is our first living child. So we have a lot of firsts with him. Where we're still learning what it means to raise a child, so we don't know where some of those boundaries are, so we have to kind of figure it out as you go, right? But those of you who have multiple children, rainbow babies, or babies before you lost your child, or both ends of the spectrum with child loss in between, you know what it means to be age appropriate. You understand what it means to be to talk in such a way that they can handle it at that moment. And then we have to wait for feedback from them to know that they get it, understand it, or they ask a bigger question, which means they're ready possibly to talk about something bigger. So we still have to parent, and that just means it's not our responsibility to graduate our children to adulthood because we had death in the family. We still need to allow them to be children. We still need to allow them to be at their age, and not mature them past what is expected of them.
Yeah. I think also to kind of add to that and just kind of add to what you've already been saying is that sometimes when we share about what's going on, sometimes in their own minds, and it's not necessarily something that you've said or that you've created in them, but in their interpretation, they take on like a sense of responsibility
They may even
Or
try to adult
yeah,
and be
and
the
maybe
adult.
they are trying to make you feel better,
Hmm.
and or maybe they even develop a sense of like guilt for that for some reason they are responsible for the loss of their brother or sister.
Right.
And so just to be aware that that can happen, and when if that comes up, then you know, talk them through that and know that's not, that was not anything that they did
Right.
or didn't do. It had nothing to do with them as
Right.
brother and sister.
And you
But
may have experienced this with other relatives and other friends and such, where they come across so sympathetic and so heavy-hearted that it's almost like they're taking on your loss, your child lost, and it's like, no, that's not their responsibility.
right,
So nor is it your child's responsibility to feel the depth of the grief and the loss of losing a child that you feel.
right,
Right?
yeah,
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah. The other thing, and then the last thing that we would just leave you with on this is that you know, if you're at a loss for what to do, if you're just like, man, I just don't have a clue, it is okay to ask for help. It's important to have that support system. That's another thing we've talked about for the last 6 months is support. So it's your church, it's nonprofits, it's groups that are online, local nonprofits. Like we have Sharing Parents of Sacramento.
right,
We always recommend first and foremost, if you've got a local nonprofit for pregnancy and infant loss support, that's ideal. Obviously, with COVID, none of us is really meeting meeting in person.
right,
But local is better, we feel. But you know, there's also marriage and family therapists. There's children, you know, therapists for children,
yep,
as well. So it's okay to seek that support, and it might be professional, and it might just be a pregnancy and infant loss support, the nonprofit in your area or online. So if you guys are getting value out of this, we really appreciate you sticking with us through this episode so far. Please subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to hit that bell in order to get reminders when we do release our weekly podcasts every week. If you have comments or questions, we'd love to hear them. And we'd love to answer them. So there's the comment section below where you can put that comment or that question out there. We do answer all those questions, and we do have conversations in those threads as well. And it's important to know that Tony and I, Our Little Sparrows on YouTube is self-funded. We do have a Patreon account. It's patreon.com/Our Little Sparrows. We'll put the link in the description below. Whatever you can give, that we do have different monetary levels. If you can give $5 a month, that's great. If you can give more, that's awesome too. And support the cause. This is a very unique channel, having to do with pregnancy and infant loss on YouTube. And so we're excited to kind of be pushing that boundary and seeing where things go on YouTube. Yeah, cool.
yeah. There was another article I came across on stillstandingmag.com, and unfortunately, I don't know the name of the author, but it is called "Am I a Big Sister?" We'll put the link to this article down below in the description as well. And I just want to read to you a couple excerpts from that post. And I believe it is the father that is writing this, and he's writing about how he and his wife shared and included their living children in remembrance of their daughter that they lost. And he writes, "We continue to try our best not shy away from Bella-themed conversations." Bella is the name of the baby. "Our children have taken an active role in the infant loss events that we have attended. They each stand in line at a table anxious to decorate an angel, color a rock, or put together a bracelet as they work through their own grief in their own way." And just a little bit later, he writes, "Allowing them to remember her their way has continued to restore and heal them along the path." He also writes, "Giving permission to your children to talk to you how and as long as they want about their feelings of grief is invaluable. Letting them go at their own speed, in their own words, and with their own expression builds a trust that they need in order to reveal this intimate and unsettled part of their hearts. Never underestimate the healing power of your attention, your patience, and your embrace." So I thought that was so powerful. Just know that even if you don't feel adequate to walk your child through this, that you are a big part of it, an important part of their healing journey, and how they are learning how to deal with death and loss and grief. And so don't underestimate yourself. Definitely give yourself a little more credit if you don't feel adequate. And it's important to allow children to feel and express their grief in their own way. Giving them permission to do that is so powerful and is so beneficial to their healing journey. And that's just what I wanted to share with you. So know that you are not alone. You are loved, and your baby will always be cherished.
And if you're watching us after the live on the recorded, if you want to watch another weekly podcast of ours, you can click or tap on the image above. And if you want to go a little deeper, we do have a grief series called The Pregnancy Loss Journey, grieving from diagnosis to the loss of your baby and beyond. You can find that series. I believe it's 25 episodes that we have on there. You can click or tap on the image below. But thank you for joining us. Take care.
Thanks.